St. Josephine Bakhita was a Sudanese-Italian Canossian religious sister who lived in Italy for 45 years after having been a slave in Sudan. In 2000, she was declared a saint, the first black woman to receive the honor in the modern era. In 1869, a daughter was born into a loving and well-respected family in western Sudan in a village of the Daju tribe. Until the age of 6, she and her 3 brothers and 3 sisters lived a happy and carefree life. That would all change around the year 1875 when one sister was abducted by Arab slave traders. 2 years later, she also became their victim. When her captive asked her name, she couldn't remember, so she didn't respond. Her captive sarcastically gave her the name Bhakita, which means fortunate, claiming that he would bring her good luck. After her captivity, Bhakita was forced to travel hundreds of miles on foot to the city of El Ubaid. On her journey, she was bought and sold more than once, and over the next several years, she was bought and sold several more times. During Bhakita's captivity, she was forced to convert to Islam and was continually abused. She was beaten most days, one time so severely that she could barely move for more than a month, and she often was bound firmly with chains to prevent her escape. On her deathbed, she would still have painful memories of these chains. One of the worst tortures she endured was the customary scarring of her breasts, belly, and arm with a sharp razor. Once the wound was inflicted, salt was then ground into it, causing permanent scarring and identifying the person as property. Around the age of 13, the city in which she lived, El Ubaid, was threatened by revolutionaries. Bhakita's owner, a Turkish general, decided to sell his slaves and return to his homeland. Bhakita was sold to an Italian vice consul working in the city of Khartoum named Callisto Legnani. For the next 2 years, Callisto treated Bhakita well, despite her being his slave. As a result, when the revolutionaries began to make advancements on the city and Callisto made plans to escape to save his life, Bhakita begged him to take her with him, preferring his kindness over a new owner. He did so, and with the help of a friend named Augusto Michelli, they safely arrived in Italy. Upon their arrival, Callisto gifted Bhakita to Augusto and his wife Maria. In the Michelli's home, Bhakita continued to be treated well, working as a nanny for their newborn daughter. 3 years later, the Michelli family decided to move back to Sudan for business reasons and sold their property in Italy. During the transition, they entrusted Bhakita and their young daughter to the care of the Canossian sisters in Venice. It was with those loving sisters that Bhakita was introduced to the Catholic faith. When the Michellis returned to take their daughter and Bhakita to Sudan, Bhakita refused to go with them. After days of trying to convince her, the Canossian sisters involved the civil authorities, and in 1889, an Italian court ruled in Bhakita's favor, declaring her free. She stayed with the sisters, and on January 9, 1890, she was baptized, confirmed, and given her first Holy Communion by the Archbishop of Venice, who later became Pope Pius X. She was given the baptismal name Josephine Margaret Fortunata, Fortunata being the Latin translation of the Arabic name Bhakita. Thus, at the age of 21, this fortunate young girl was flooded with God's grace, and her formerly abused body and soul began a transformation. Josephine stayed with the sisters, entered their novitiate in 1893, and made her vows in 1896, becoming Sister Josephine Margaret Fortunata. In 1902, she was transferred to the city of Schio, northeast of Verona, where she assisted her religious community through cooking, sewing, embroidery, and welcoming visitors at the door. Her gentleness, calming voice, and the ever-present smile became well known, and the locals still refer to her as Sor Moretta, Little Brown Sister, or Madre Moretta, black mother. Her special charisma and reputation for sanctity were noticed by her order. The first publication of her story in 1931 made her famous throughout Italy. During the Second World War, she shared the fears and hopes of the townspeople who considered her a saint and felt protected by her presence. Bombs did not spare Schio, but the war passed without a single casualty. Her last years were marked by pain and sickness. She used a wheelchair, but she retained her cheerfulness, and if asked how she was, she would always smile and answer, "As the Master desires." In the extremity of her last hours, her mind was driven back to her youth and slavery, and she cried out, "The chains are too tight. Loosen them a little, please." After a while, she came around again. Someone asked her, "How are you? Today is Saturday," probably hoping that this would cheer her because Saturday is the day of the week dedicated to Mary, Mother of Jesus. Bakhita replied, "Yes, I am so happy. Our Lady, Our Lady." These were her last audible words. Bhakita died at 8:10 p.m. on February 8, 1947. For 3 days, her body lay in repose while thousands of people arrived to pay their respects. Her remains were transferred to the Church of the Holy Family of the Canossian Convent of Schio in 1969. The first steps toward her beatification began in 1959. She was beatified in 1992 and canonized 8 years later. She is venerated as a modern African saint and as a statement against the brutal history of slavery. She has been adopted as the patron saint of modern Sudan and human trafficking survivors. A sister seeing St. Josephine so peaceful in prayer once asked how she was going on. She answered, "I am going slowly, step by step, because I have 2 heavy bags to carry, one containing my own sins, the other Christ's merits. When I get to the other side, I will open my bags and say, 'Eternal Father, now judge.'" And to St. Peter, "You can close that door of yours, for I am going to stay."